Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Golden Astrologer Podcast. This is Deb McBride, and it is Sunday, May 3rd in the year 2026. And I am recording this in beautiful, fabulous, lovely Escazú, Costa Rica, where it is pouring rain, as if you couldn't hear that in the background. I kind of waited to do this, but I've been waiting a while, and I just said, it could rain all night, so I got to go ahead and do this. And it's about 5 p.m. or so here, so I've been waiting a little while for this. So on we go with lots of things to talk about. This is another big week. But first, some stories. That full moon in Scorpio was intense. And I think it kicked my butt a little bit. And, it's the moon in Scorpio. It's complicated. The moon is not at its best there. But it happens every year. We have a full moon in Scorpio, and it's important to sort of take the lessons from the full moon and, embody them, embrace them, digest them, assimilate them, bring them to life. And, it can be very, very positive and helpful. I think that this full moon had its moment because of the square to Pluto in Aquarius. And it was past Pluto in Aquarius, of course, but it had to square Pluto on the way to being full. And so the energy from the full moon, I was already feeling it on Thursday, and the energy from that was really very intense. And so there was a lot to sift through, wade through, plow through, wear your Wellington boots through. So that was a pretty big intense full moon in Scorpio. How are you feeling from that moon in Scorpio? Anything interesting surface? And Uranus is in Gemini. And it's, last Saturday night, not yesterday, the week before, we went out to dinner just as Uranus entered Gemini. And we were sitting there at the table, and Amira, who is the granddaughter of my landlady and friend Giselle, and she's Monica's niece, she was visiting us from Austin with her baby. And she was saying, "Let's get weird." And we were starting to have conversations, and she said, "Let's get weird." And, she wanted weird conversations, which we had. And, this is it. Let's get weird. It's Uranus and Gemini, and we're going to get weird. And I have a weird story for you that I just love so much. So I had this story appear to me on Thursday, and I said, I can't wait to tell my podcast audience this story. So I have a subscription to Dr. Joe Live, which is Dr. Joe Dispenza's monthly Q&A. And it's the last Thursday of every month. And he used to do an alternate month where it was Q&A and then he'd present something else. And sometimes he still presents other things. But so he gets on the Q&A and on Thursday afternoon, and he's introduced by his team. And he is usually very matter-of-fact, very soft, very straightforward about what he's discussing, and he answers people's questions. You can write in and ask a question of him. So before he got to the questions, he tells us a little bit. He always tells a little bit about what's going on in their world, their research and papers that have been published, and the science, and the retreats, all the retreats that he has. And so there was a retreat in Denver, Colorado a few weeks ago in early April. And he said, we had a really good retreat in Denver, Colorado, and we had this happen and that happen, and, and the usual stories of people healing themselves and having incredible experiences and testimonials. And he was talking about the testimonials they had. And he said, and we had one woman who had come to the retreat in Mexico City 2 years ago. And she lost a necklace with a very specific pendant there in Mexico City 2 years ago. And I'm thinking, why is Dr. Joe why does he care about a necklace? But he said, so she lost this necklace, and here we are in Denver, Colorado, and we went to the pineal gland meditation, which is a very long meditation that they do at 4 a.m. And he said that in the meditation, this woman saw the necklace with the pendant clear as day when she was doing the meditation. And it appeared to her in the void of the quantum field in the meditation. And she was seeing the necklace perfectly. And then she went back to her hotel room in Denver, Colorado, where the retreat was. And she opened a drawer because she was packing. And there was the necklace. 2 years later in a completely different country. And he's telling this story, and he says, this is an example of how reality isn't linear. And he tells this story in this very calm way, and he has this one little glimmer in his eye that I'm seeing him saying, like, on another level, we are in wild territory right now. And when he told the story, I burst out hysterical laughing because she lost the necklace 2 years ago in Mexico City and found it again in a completely different hotel in Denver, Colorado 2 years later. This is the quantum model of reality. I love this story. I'm obsessed with the story. I couldn't even stop thinking about it Thursday. It was so fabulous. Anything is possible, Astro Darlings. Anything is possible. So I just love these Uranus and Gemini moments where it's like, yeah, that is an anything is possible, wild quantum model of reality story. And I had to share it with you guys. And know that there's going to be more stories like this from all over the world and all pockets of places that you don't expect. So expect the unexpected, expect wild stories, unexpected stories from Uranus and Gemini. And that Uranus and Gemini is already, I'm seeing it very prominent in people's lives. And I'm watching it unfold already. So this is where we're at. This is where we're going. And Uranus and Pluto are going to be dancing together in a trine for a long time. And this is very exciting. So in the meantime, speaking of Pluto, we had this full moon in Scorpio ruled by Pluto, but Pluto is stationing to go retrograde as the thunder comes. And that retrograde is going to happen Wednesday the 6th at 11:34 a.m. Eastern Time. And so Pluto going retrograde, Pluto is going to go back over where it was earlier this year. It's retrograding at 5 degrees Aquarius. And by the end of June, it will go back to 4 degrees and then eventually go back to 3 degrees. And it's going to hover around there for a little while. So if you have planets in Aquarius at those degrees, like I do, and you have planets in Leo at those degrees, and possibly Scorpio, or the opposite sign from Scorpio, which is Taurus, where Uranus just left, the fixed signs are going to feel it the most. And the thing is that when the full moon came, and like I said, it was going to square Pluto before it really got to be full. It had to pass the square to Pluto early in Scorpio, squaring Pluto in Aquarius, and that's when it really got juicy. And that's one of the reasons why I think it was so intense. It isn't just squaring Pluto, it's ruled by Pluto, who is stopping in the sky. And the station of a planet always gives us a pause to say, all right, this is deep, we're going intense, and this is the nature of Pluto and a Scorpio full moon. So it was very powerful. I think it was exhausting. I think I was exhausted on Friday. I slept well, but I was still exhausted. And we have to sort of assimilate a lot of the transformative energies that were coming during this full moon and moon in Scorpio square Pluto. And I really feel like if we are feeling this deeply, then we need to really sit with it, work with it, understand it, because it was showing us something powerful. more than likely. And, you know, you have the power to change your life. You have the power to create anything. People's necklaces are showing up in other countries after they lost them. Anything is possible. I got to get to one of these retreats. I have got to get to one of those retreats. But we are creators, and we can take this full moon energy and create anything from it. And that's what I had to do. I said, or initially it was kicking my butt. I was very tired, very tired. And I felt like, okay, this is some things that need to shift a little bit. And I was able to do that through my work, my meditations, and stuff like that. So I recommend, when you feel complicated emotions from transits like this, that's the time to sit with yourself and be present and sort through it. So, meantime, Mercury is going to square Pluto, because Mercury is now in the sign of Taurus, which we knew was coming from last week's podcast. And Mercury is squaring Pluto on Wednesday, the 5th of May, Cinco de Mayo. And so, as Pluto is stationing, stopping in the sky, Mercury is going to have a conversation with Pluto on Tuesday, May 5th, Cinco de Mayo, at 6:08 p.m. Okay? That's another complicated relationship, because Mercury has information for us. And Mercury is going to speak to Pluto in a challenging way. And so what is the information that is coming forward as Pluto is stopping and Mercury's knocking on his door saying, I have to talk to you. Now remember, Mercury is the only planet, or the only being in mythology rather, who can go from the upper world to the underworld. Mercury can do that. Other beings cannot. Other goddesses and gods cannot. Mercury is the messenger, and he can step into the underworld and talk to Pluto and get some information, and then step back out of the underworld and come up to the upper world and have a conversation with all of us about what he learned from Pluto. And this is one of Mercury's deep dives into the underworld that he makes annually. And the square is a challenging relationship, so it might be some uncomfortable energy that comes up for us these days. But this, again, is worth sitting with and sifting through as Mercury and Pluto speak to one another. The other interesting conversation that's happening this week is Mars in Aries is squaring Jupiter in Cancer, and that's tomorrow, the 4th of May. And Mars and Jupiter are very high energy planets together. That's lots of confidence. That's lots of stepping forward into one's power. That's, maybe a little bit over the top, brusque. Mars and Jupiter's like, I can make this light. Oops, maybe not. It's a square. So again, it's a challenge. But Mars and Jupiter are really excitable to when they meet each other in a challenge. They are jazzed. Jupiter gets a vitamin shot from Mars, and Mars gets a burst of expansiveness and confidence. Now, a square between them isn't necessarily a bad challenge, but it might say to us, keep a lid on it a little bit, because you might feel like you can accomplish anything and you're like super powered, and you can, but you've got to keep it in balance. And those planets don't necessarily know balance when they are squaring one another. So it's good energy, it's positive energy, it's optimistic energy, and it's a good punch of optimism in our lives, and I like that. It's at 10:08 p.m. Eastern Time, so hopefully you get all your energy out in the day before you go to sleep that night. Otherwise, you're going to be wired before you go to bed that night in this region of the world. It's earlier for me. So hopefully, we all get our burst of confidence and energy and dynamics out of the way earlier in the day. those moments when you're getting ready for bed and it's like, I have a great idea. And then you have to sit back and write things down or go into stuff. And it's like, then it gets later and later. But I think this is interesting because Monday we have Mars and Jupiter squaring, and then Tuesday we have Mercury and Pluto squaring. So I think they have something to do with one another. There's confidence, there's transformation, there's a burst of enthusiasm. There's a lot of energy saying, hey, I can make this happen. And I think that that's really important and positive to keep in mind. We are creators, and we can make whatever we want happen. And then Pluto goes retrograde. So he takes his deep dive into the underworld and visits his friends that he has in the underworld, his relations in the underworld. And he keeps moving backwards until later this year. So he usually takes like a 5-month journey in the underworld. So this is a good time when Pluto goes retrograde to really be present with yourself and your deeper consciousness evolution, right? It's something that you really want to pay attention to. It doesn't mean you're not going to get anything done in the physical world and the 3D. You have to get things done. We have to do that every single day. But it says, keep one foot in awareness of the subconscious drives and notice where, your patterns are evolving and like showing up and how they sift through your daily life, your daily consciousness. So, I think it's good when all the planets go direct, but that's only really for half the year. The outer planets are all direct. They take long periods of time in their den. So it's good though to do the inner homework while Pluto goes retrograde in Aquarius, and it takes these next months to sort of step inward. And certainly, as I mentioned, if you have a planet that is getting touched by Pluto, especially one of those fixed signs that it's more of a hard aspect, you are going to notice this more in particular. And you might get pulled into the underworld a little bit. And that's okay, because obviously there's information for you there. And Mercury is going to help you with that this week. So learn the information, learn the experience. Go deep with yourself, because that's the way through this. And Pluto, as long as you are going deep with yourself, as long as you have time for it to be introspective, Pluto is going to reward you with that. And Pluto will always bring you to a place where you can understand this in a much deeper way and a more beneficial way, and shake off the things that are no longer necessary for your life. That's the job of the outer planets. Meanwhile, both Mercury and Venus and Jupiter and the Moon are in mutual reception at this moment. So the Moon is in Sagittarius, which is ruled by Jupiter, and Jupiter is in Cancer, which is ruled by the Moon. Moon's going to be in Sagittarius until Tuesday at 3:06 p.m. Eastern Time, when it goes into Capricorn. And Venus and Mercury are going to be in mutual reception because for a couple weeks, because Mercury is in Taurus, Venus's sign, and Venus is in Gemini, Mercury's sign. And what's interesting is Mercury just went into Taurus the other day, as I had mentioned on last week's podcast, and Mercury's only going to be in Taurus for 2 weeks. 2 weeks in a day or something. It's 2 weeks from today that Mercury will enter Gemini, its own sign. And I think that's interesting because Mercury loves being in Gemini, and then of course it's going to cross Uranus right away at that point. And that's going to be really electric, but that's not for another couple weeks. In the meantime, what does this tell us? This tells us that Mercury and Venus are communicating. Mercury's saying, I like it in cozy Taurus. Venus is saying, I like the buffet I have in in Gemini, and they have a connection there. It's like they exchanged apartment keys, and they're living in each other's homes. And so Venus and Mercury are always close to the sun, and they are always close to one another. So it often happens like this, where they have a lot to say to one another because they're close by. But this is actually, they're in each other's signs, which doesn't always happen. And they have a dynamic between them that's saying we can communicate in relationships maybe a little more easily than we are doing in previous weeks. Like these weeks now, we can start to really have some communication in our relationships in a way that enlightens us and brings us to a place of real understanding, because Mercury and Venus relate to each other through their signs. So I think that's important to note. I think that's really important to note. Venus is going to be there for another couple weeks as Mercury will leave Taurus for Gemini sooner than Venus will leave Gemini for Cancer. And so that's actually going to be interesting, because this whole time that Mercury is in Taurus, it's going to be communicating with Venus. So I think that's important for us to pay attention to. Relationship dynamics should be talked about, should be revealed, should be connected. We should be able to connect in our relationships and have conversations that are important. Now, the moon is only going to be, like I said, in Sagittarius until Tuesday, and then it's going to go into Capricorn. But as long as it's in Sagittarius this time, it's in Jupiter's sign. And Jupiter is in the moon's sign, but it's been that way since last year. And so it's actually really interesting that that is more of an emotional conversation. And the moon is in Sag, and it wants to do things and travel and have fun and be a little wildly creative and maybe a little more risk-taking. And Jupiter is in a very cozy place for itself because it's in its exalted sign of Cancer, the moon's home. Now, these are more subtle changes. These are more subtle conversations, whereas Mercury and Venus are an actual conversation because of the Gemini and the Mercury. But Jupiter and the moon are definitely connecting with one another in that mutual reception, like they exchange apartment keys. But this is a little more subtle and less directly communicative. It isn't so verbal. Venus and Mercury have more verbal things going on. This is not that. And it's an emotional thing. You might feel more secure right now. You might be walking through your insecurities very easily right now. It may be something that gives you confidence. And this has been going on once a month, where the moon goes into Sagittarius. Jupiter has been there in Cancer for all these months since last year, but it's not at the same time that Venus and Mercury are in mutual reception. So I think this is a very interesting dynamic. It helps us in our relationships. It helps us with our emotions, and it helps us communicate what we're feeling. So I think that is really an important thing to consider while we have this going on for the next couple days. And then on Thursday, we're going to have a really long void moon once that moon goes into Capricorn. The moon goes in Tuesday, but on Thursday, when the moon is finishing its transit of Capricorn, it goes void at 10:18 a.m. and does not go into Aquarius until Friday morning at 3:27 a.m. So the rest of the day, and that's Eastern time, the rest of the day, once the moon goes void in the morning, it's not coming out of void until the next day. So this is another one of those long void moons, and this is because all the outer planets have now entered new signs, and they're all at the beginning of the sign, and nothing is left at the end of the zodiac for the moon to talk to long term like it has been. in these last few years. And so this is very different. We're going to have these longer void moons. Yesterday the moon was void all day too. So these are good times. These long void moons are good times to get regular business as usual done. We joke in the astrology community, well, I like to do laundry, and this is a good laundry day. Yeah, it's a good laundry day, but it's also, if you have projects you're working on and you've been working on them steadily, then certainly this is a good time to like step back into your projects and work on them. And I like to stay close to these long void moons because these aren't the days you want to initiate something new. I'm not going to announce a new program on a void moon day. I'm not going to step into, a new position and start something brand new on a void moon day. I think that it's good that people don't have job interviews on void moon days because they don't necessarily go anywhere. Although there are these wild card void moons, and as my teacher once said to me, you never know what's going to happen, when I told him the story of how I first landed in Costa Rica on a void moon. So that was my entree to Costa Rica, was I landed here on a void moon in Aquarius of all things. And you would think that this isn't going to amount to anything. No, in my head, this was a vacation. I got here on vacation in January of 2016, and when I came here only on vacation on that void moon, I expected to go home, and that was that, and that's not what happened. And so that is the beginning of something unusual a lot of times when there is a void moon. So, I have to step back into the quantum model of reality again. When the void moon comes, and it's long like that, you might have some unknown experience or an experience with the unknown. And I think we have to welcome these unknown experiences in our lives because that's what makes life interesting and that's what gives us opportunities in our lives. Now, just because I didn't figure it out that day, in that moment, that I was going to live here or anything, but just because I landed here on a void moon, it could be anything. It could be anything. So you just go with the flow on those void moons and see what happens. My late partner, when we would plan vacations together, John would not book a vacation. We're not flying out on the void moon. We're not flying out on the void moon. And had I been the one to pick that time to fly, I might not have picked that day. I was not in charge of my schedule at that time. My friend's family, her family, her brother and sister-in-law, he picked the time that we were flying and got help from his wife for it later on because we were leaving at 4 a.m. But, the way we flew that day and everything, it's like later on a flight came up for 9:30, but they didn't know that when he first booked the flight, and we had to leave the house at 4 a.m. for a 6 a.m. flight. So or 3:30 in the morning. But, it's okay. It did its job. You never know what's going to happen with that void moon. And I did not have control of my schedule. So sometimes you have to let the universe take over and amazing things happen. So that's like the theme of today's podcast. We're letting the universe take over and amazing things will happen and step into the void and step into the unknown, and phenomenal things can happen. So at the end of the week, a week from today, we are going to have the sun in Taurus make a beautiful aspect, a kiss to Jupiter. And for those of you in the U.S. where it's Mother's Day celebrating, that's a beautiful day to celebrate Mother's Day, your mother, or your, with your children if you're a mother, or if you're a cat mother like me. So yeah, whatever, your fur baby or your puppy, your kitten, whatever, your hamster, your hedgehog, you could celebrate them as well. But the moon will be in Pisces at 1:39 p.m. Eastern time that day, and then the sun and Jupiter will make that lovely sextile at 10:14 p.m. But it's going to be all day. The sun does not move so fast, so that it spends the day with Jupiter in a lovely relationship, and that's perfect and such a nice way to spend Mother's Day and the second Sunday in May. Costa Rica's Mother's Day is August 15th and everything shuts down. And Labor Day was Friday, the 1st of May. Labor Day is always Friday, the 1st of May. And apparently other countries celebrate Labor Day the 1st of May also. So that was a holiday. I am here for you to have more conversations about the quantum model of reality and Uranus and Gemini and Pluto and Aquarius and the weird territory we're going into and the exciting things that's going to bring to us. So if you want a session with me about what weirdness is going to come into your life and your horoscope and how this is affecting you, certainly connect with me through my website, thegoldenastrologer.com, and book a session where we can talk about everything that's happening and how this five-pointed star is going to affect you in July, where that's going to be, how that's going to appear. And you can just click book online on my website, or if you're following me on Instagram, The Golden Astrologer, you can click book now, and you can have a session with me with astrology, or a nice Reiki session where we do Lemurian 5D Reiki, where it's rainbow crystal Reiki, and we use the etheric crystals in your field to help you through your life, and so many more tools. And there's expansion mentoring, which is for 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. If you'd like to join me long term, we can do that. I have my new vision system where I can make a scan of you and send flower essences to your field and help you do emotional clearings. And those are always very fruitful and worthwhile. And I invite you to join me in session for any of those things. It would be lovely to see you. Many beautiful greetings to you in this first week of May, a new month. And I hope you have a lovely week ahead. Thank you so much for listening. Much gratitude to all of you. Go deep with this Pluto retrograde and allow yourself to, connect with patterns and things you would like to clear out from, your consciousness, because that's what Pluto asks us to do when it goes retrograde, and dive into the underworld. Thank you for listening. Gratitude to everyone. Have an incredibly beautiful week.